Let's call to order this January 16, 2024 meeting of the Board of Appeals regarding the property at 7-9 Pleasant Street and 672 Randolph Avenue. This application is the application of Falcone Properties LLC. And this is the second meeting regarding this particular application. This is the February 27th meeting. In between meetings, Mrs. McKettrick, who represents the applicant, has been working with the planning board regarding relief that the applicant was seeking from the planning board, and has filed with the board a few days ago, and this is on our website if anyone wants to review it. A site plan modification decision that was signed by all members of the planning board. It's dated February 22nd, 2024, and it was recorded with the town clerk's office at 8:23 a.m. on the February 24th. And it sets forth the reasons in great detail for the modification of the site plan that's been on file regarding the 2019 application. And also on at or about that time, February 22nd, 2024, Mrs. McKettrick, who represents the applicant, filed a very detailed memorandum with the Board of Appeals regarding the legal and factual issues that are involved in this application. This is on our website as well, together with plans that Mrs. McKettrick filed showing the modifications in the proposed variance and modification of the 2019 application that basically dealt with the Ben's Cookie Factory site, and to which is attached numerous plans showing the proposed parking and showing its relations to neighbors and other points of interest. So we certainly thank Mrs. McKettrick for both of those filings, and I think we have the preamble finished. We're conducting this hearing tonight, and we'll first hear from the applicant, who will describe the present state of this application, the modifications that have been made in the application as it presently stands before us, and why, in her opinion, the board should grant a modification of the grant a variance for parking to the rear of the 672 building, and modify the 2019 decision of the planning of the Board of Appeals on this matter. So, Mrs. McKettrick, I guess without further ado, welcome back to the Board of Appeals, and we're delighted to hear from you. I should just say that my name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals, and with me tonight on this hearing, as on the other two hearings, are board member Ted Daber and the board member Kathleen O'Donnell. We appreciate their dedicated service on the board. And so, Marion, why don't we turn the hearing over to you? We're delighted to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Marion McKettrick, and I've been representing the applicant for both of these applications, the one before the planning board for site plan approval, and this one for a variance and a modification of the board's 2019 decision approving mixed use in the Bent's building. So as you've already stated, I did provide a summary for you of all the changes that have been made in the plans. And I'll just quickly read through them. I also want to mention that in addition to giving you the updated site plan dated 1/19/24, that's the final site plan for the planning board purposes. I did give you a letter from the Director of Public Works dated February 1st. The engineers have reviewed the stormwater design, and they've reviewed the other engineering aspects of this application, and they did not request any changes. They have decided that the design is a good design. So, and in fact, that it will reduce the flow of stormwater off the site substantially from what it is now, because there are no structures at all in the adjoining lot capturing stormwater. So this application received input from a number of hearings with the planning board and a number of hearings with the Board of Appeals. And so the changes that were made in the application were requested not only by members of each board, but they were also requested by members of the public. And with the planning board, we did have a site walk, which was in early December, and the neighbors attended that. And, further changes were made in the plans, and then some additional changes after that time when we met again with the planning board in early January. So from the original plan, which shows an additional parking area in a lot adjoining 7 to 9 Pleasant Street, we did a number of things. We added, instead of having just vegetation around the parking lot, at the request of a neighbor, we added a wooden fence just like the one that's already at Bent's. And the only change in that is that this fence will be a little bit higher. It'll be 6 feet high with 2 feet of lattice on top of it, all of which is designed to shield a view of the parking lot from the neighbors. The plantings around the parking area were discussed at substantial length, mostly with the planning board and with the neighbors. The neighbors want, as much of the view of this parking lot obscured as possible. So we ended up with a proposal for 16 green giant arborvitaes. Those are really big trees that will surround the parking lot. And in addition, 5 red maples to provide some variety in the vegetation. And the location of the red maples was discussed again at some length with neighbors. And they wanted the red maples. They didn't want them right on the edge of the lot because they do shed a lot of leaves.
So they didn't want to rake them. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So we moved them back, but they're still filling the space in between the parking area and the neighboring property lines. We also we provided more specific notes in the plan describing the species of trees and how many would be planted and minimum planting sizes. So these trees will not be small when they're planted. And that can all be seen on the site plan. We did also create a designated snow storage area. This will be in back of the new parking area. And we removed a berm so that the snow could be pushed easily into that area. The area where snow will be stored is the area into the woods in the rear of the lot. It doesn't actually face neighboring residential properties, and it should be more than ample for snow storage. Of course, we haven't had any snow, but someday perhaps we will have some. So plans have been made in case we do. And finally, the most recent change is that the site plan shows a marked perimeter now for the area at 672 Randolph Ave, which the applicant's proposing receive a use variance for a commercial parking area. And that was a request from this board. So you do need to, it's best, to look at these plans on your computer and enlarge them. You should be able to see that dotted line very clearly surrounding the parking lot. And you'll also see the square footage of 8,344 square feet. And you will also see measurements all along the perimeter of that area. So even though it's not a separate lot, the type of measurements that you would find if it were a separate lot have been provided, and the board can, if it chooses to decide that a variance should be granted, it should be able to tie the variance to this plan and to that designated area. We discussed with the planning board also maintenance of the trees after they're planted, and that's all in the planning board decision. It's a condition. that the owner will continue to be responsible for maintenance of any trees that are being planted on this plan and have to replace them if they don't thrive. So the tenants or neighbors, no one else will be responsible for maintaining the trees. This earlier updates that were made to this plan were that we added more detailed plans showing the stormwater drainage structures and locations. All the abutting landowners are properly identified on the site plan. And finally, the parking area lighting was originally light posts, and now it's been revised to be the same lighting as you see at Bent's, which is more of a residential style lighting fixture inside the wooden fence, inside the parking lot. It's adequate, but it doesn't shine outside the fenced area. We also provided a photometric plan demonstrating that there is no lighting overspill onto neighboring lots from this parking area. Finally, a more substantial change was that the location of the parking area was revised several times, with the objective being to get it as far as possible away from the intersection with the lots, the neighboring lots on Randolph Ave. So it's now been turned at an angle. It's been reduced in size, and it runs more along the location of the existing parking lot at Bent's, and further away from the lot line. The additional parking area is a little bit smaller. It has 15 parking spaces, and then the net increase in parking spaces, because we lost parking spaces at Bent's to create the access to this lot, is 10. So the final count is 10 new parking spaces. All of this work will yield that, but we really feel that those spaces are needed, and I'll explain that as I go through the arguments for the variance. But they are not excessive. The planning board was concerned, about creating too much parking, attracting too many cars somehow. So I did an analysis and I sent it in a memo to the planning board describing what the requirements would be for the mixed uses at Bent's if this were in a business district, and compared the number of spaces that, and some of it is discretionary to the Board of Appeals, but projecting the number of spaces that would be required and the number of spaces provided in the original decision, and now the number of spaces provided now. And it's just about appropriate, given the fact that some of those decisions about what's adequate would be decided by the Board of Appeals. It is not a lot more than what would be called for if this were in a business district and you had to provide certain parking. This, of course, is an historic site. Both of these lots are historic. And so as a result, the Bent's building didn't have to technically, from a zoning standpoint, it had been in a business district, didn't have to provide the required number of parking spaces, because the original Bent's building, which didn't even have legal access, although I think it used it to the right of way along the left side, had little or no parking in back of the building. And so, this was an improvement over the original condition. And then the new uses needed less parking than from current zoning standpoint, the whole building as a commercial building and a manufacturing facility would have required. So what happened here is that in 2019, there was a very limited area available in back of the Bent's building to provide parking. And in 2021, the owner of the Bent's building was able to purchase the adjacent lot, which has a residential house on it. And the interesting thing about that adjacent lot is that before about 1983, I believe, it was owned by the Bent's family. They owned a huge area of land actually around this manufacturing facility. At that time, the Parati family had purchased the property, and they were operating the bakery and the cookie factory and everything. And they had to sell some of the property for financial reasons. And so they sold this lot. And from that time to when Falcone Properties repurchased it back in 2021, the two lots were owned separately. But before then, for many decades, the lot was used to provide firewood. All of the ovens at Bent's were wood-fired, And it was also occasionally used to park trucks up in back of the building. So they were used together. That's not a legal justification for providing the variance, but it does give you some perspective on the appropriateness of possibly using these lots together. After the Falcone family bought the property, we did a study. I did some analysis for them and studied a number of different possible uses for the property, including a proposal, an idea of subdividing the property, leaving the historic house in front, creating a lot in back, and other ideas as well. But in the end, Mr. Falcone decided that he really preferred this option. He felt that the mixed use events really needed some additional parking. He didn't want to change the house that's on the adjacent lot, which is it's a very attractive sort of historic Victorian cottage. And it was built probably 10 or 15 years before the Bentz building. So it's even older than the Bentz building. And it's been maintained nicely. It's situated at the top of a hill. It looks down over Randolph Ave, and it creates a nice historic setting for the Bentz building, as well as being attractive in its own right, and it has its own driveway. So this proposal was a proposal a little bit less intrusive, than a number of the other options that we looked at, but it was a way of using the two lots together again. And of course, issue was also the difficulty of doing other development options with this lot, which is on top of a rock, basically. The house is at a high elevation over Randolph Ave, and the rear of the house, which we looked at numerous times and went on a site walk with the planning board, is very rocky and ledgy. It will be challenging to create the underground structures needed for the parking lot, but not as challenging as it would be to try to build a big building back there. And finally, we felt that it would be less intrusive to do this, that there would be no changes proposed to the use of the Bentz building, and that this parking lot would simply improve the parking situation the parking permits approved in 2019. So the lot at 672 Randolph Ave is 23,652 square feet, and this is a Residence C district. So just on a flat plan, at least, it looks like there's plenty of area in that lot to do a subdivision, to change the way it looks, to do who knows what, to bring in a new proposal, even a big proposal like some of the ones we've seen recently. The Falcones had no interest in doing anything like that. But I do think that one argument for granting this variance is that it's the least intrusive way to make use of the back of this lot. And because the Bentz building is there and the mixed use has been approved already, because this lot faces Randolph Ave, where there's a terrific load of traffic all the time, every day, and because there's not only a weird kind of irregular shape to the lot, a significant elevation rise to the lot that also makes it more difficult to develop in other ways. But it does work for the parking area. The obstacle here was to create protections for the neighbors on the right side. So that's why it took a number of months and a number of hearings to work out what might be a good plan. And that's why you're seeing a substantial amount of landscaping, a change in the fencing, a change in the lighting, a change in the orientation of the lot. These are all changes suggested after we had discussion with neighbors and with each board, and a number of ideas and recommendations were floated. And we think the ones that we've come out with now are the best ones that we could come up with. Those changes also, I think that the decision from the planning board pretty much addresses the issue of substantial detriment, whether the design of the lot will have a negative impact on neighbors, a substantial negative impact. So I'm not going to go through those things in a great deal of detail. But I will point out that the new parking area will still be accessed from the same driveway that goes into the Bentz parking area. There will be no new parking, no new driveway coming in from Randolph Ave that everybody can see from the street. We've eliminated tandem parking spaces for employees that were in the original plans. Those are very inconvenient to use and often are not used. which means the employees spread out across the parking lot and they get in the way of other people who need to park. 5 parking spaces are going to be created for apartment tenants. They're going to be relocated to the new parking area, but they'll be located right next to the building. So the area of the new parking that's closest to the building will be the tenant parking. We created on-site short-term parking spaces in this new plan. The Milton Police Department has specifically requested the Falcones do that. And in their old parking, in the original plan, approved in 2019, there just really wasn't space to do that. Now there will be, and that's going to be very helpful because a lot of people come in and pick up sandwiches and they pick up catering items, and they're only there a short time. If they're parking on the street, they have a tendency to try to double park. It's not safe to do that. So we think safety will be improved substantially by adding these short-term spaces. And then finally, the addition of 10 net new spaces will be good for employees, tenants, customers, and visitors, all of whom are in each other's way now. The tenants in particular find their spaces taken often during the day. With these additional spaces, we believe they'll have much better access to their own parking spaces. So these are desirable changes. They're only possible by making an additional parking area for parking available, and they do substantially improve the on-site parking for the uses approved in 2019. And all the other conditions in the 2019 decision would remain the same. So that's a very quick summary of some of the information that I covered in my memo, but I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And I thought that the planning board decision was particularly well written. So I want to thank the planning board for its hard work and its very detailed and accurate description of the site plan and the reasons for granting the relief that they did. Let me just ask you a couple of questions. And the first one relates to the existing conditions on the parking in the front of the Bent's property. You mentioned that the police department, for safety reasons, is suggesting that parking to the rear would be preferable and safer. Have there been a lot of accidents and difficulty with the public parking on the front of the Bent's, on the front of Pleasant Street?
To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't
describe
been
that a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. To the best of my knowledge, there has not been an accident yet, but the police are there, and they've moved people along, and they have specifically contacted Robert Falcone to say that you really need to get these short-term parkers off the street. We feel that there's a potential for an accident, and we'd like to see a change. And there wasn't a lot that he could do at that time that was legal. That you would only approve parking spaces in certain locations, and the planning board had only approved parking spaces. So this is the only solution he could come up with. And I do think it's important, though, to note that the police department wanted to see this change.
My recollection of visiting the site recently shows that people, when they exit Randolph Avenue and they take a right-hand turn onto Pleasant Street, sometimes they approach that intersection at an unreasonably high rate of speed, and it's a very short distance to the 672 Randolph Avenue cottage and the actual Bent's cookie building. Does that still persist, that people are trying to either rush through the intersection? And
well, I have to speak from personal experience there. Yes, they do. And the last parking space, the last one that's closest to that exit where you come off Randolph Ave, almost feels like it shouldn't be a parking space. And if you're on the driver's side and you pull over, you almost feel like you shouldn't get out of the car. I mean, so again, this is up to the town, of course, how they lay out the parking spaces. But if this additional parking is made available, the town might want to consider eliminating that last space. Because as you say, the driveway going up to the house at 672 Randolph is really quite close to that. that turn off, and they have to deal with, being able to turn safely and being able to get out safely under difficult circumstances. So that was an existing condition. It was a difficulty. We talked about it a lot in 2019. It was always a problem. When people talked, we had discussions with the town about whether they might want to make close off the street in some way or change the configuration. But not everybody is in favor of that. It's usually best to leave the traffic pattern the way it is. It's already one way. So anyway, this is the only solution we've been able to come up with so far.
Sure. Let me ask you this question. If the board should see fit to grant the variance and the modification of the previous special permit, would you anticipate that the board would indicate as part of the part of the Board of Appeals decision that compliance with the site plan modification decision of the planning board would be a condition to any such decision of the Board of Appeals?
I would expect that the Board of Appeals would require that. That's what was done in 2019. Each decision requires compliance with
the other one.
the other
Yeah.
board's conditions. And in this case, since the site plan approval has been issued first, you could require that as a condition in your decision.
And I think, as you noted in your letter to the Board of Appeals, at least in your professional opinion, the 2019 decision of the Board of Appeals anticipated changes and additional conditions or additional modifications over time based upon the then existing circumstances. Is that fairly put?
That's correct. There's language in that decision anticipating that, or at least allowing for it, allowing for changes.
And then all of a sudden, when the opportunity for Mr. Falcone and his company to acquire a 672 site became available, and they took advantage of that, it seems to have opened the door for improvements in the 2009 special permit and allowed additional parking and to make various changes that did two things. Number one, it preserved the architectural integrity of both these 672 cottage as well as the Bent's building itself, but it provided the additional land necessary to improve the parking conditions and access for customers and the public at large. Is that a fair way to
Yes, I agree. That's correct. And that was one of the big benefits of acquiring this property.
What's that, Mary?
Okay, let me. That's really all I have. Ms. O'Donnell, do you have any questions of Mrs. McGettrick?
Well, I just wanted to state for the record that I think I've stated this before, is that I did represent the prior owners of 672 Randolph. I represented them when they purchased the property, and I represented them when they sold the property. And so I would agree with the chair that the acquisition of this piece of land has certainly made the opportunity for us correction of a dangerous situation for the parking at this building. It provides about, as I said, I agree with Ms. McGettrick that it's about the only solution that you could reasonably come up with, is to sort of add this parking in the back. I appreciate the fact that you've relocated the angle of the parking. So you sort of took out that little, I didn't understand the necessity of the space between the existing parking and the new one. Just as a logical sense, it didn't make much, I didn't understand why that was the case. And so I do think that, with this site plan changes and with the conditions that had been suggested by the planning board in terms of providing the screening and the lighting and the fencing and all that sort of thing, I think you've done the best you could do to address concerns of the abutters that had been raised at our prior meetings. So I'll compliment the architects and your applicant for addressing those situations.
Thank you.
And I give you
Alright,
credit for writing the decision for the planning board.
I didn't hear that, Kathleen. I'm
They didn't
sorry.
write it.
I thought the
Well, the planning board
did.
writes, issues the final decision, but they do ask, if there's an attorney, they will sometimes ask the attorney to draft the decision. And then they work over it and they're satisfied, that's great, and whatever. I'm happy to do it.
I thought it was remarkably well done, that for a very complex um, site plan review that the planning board was required to conduct. When I read this particular decision, I actually understood everything the planning board was doing, but more importantly, the reasons that they were doing it. So, congratulations to the planning board, and thanks for their hard work on this particular application. If you don't have any more questions, Ms. O'Donnell.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, let's, Mr. Daber, do you have any questions of Mrs. McKettrick?
Yeah, just a couple of quickies. I'm assuming since no one else is here that, and I apologize if you said this, but that the neighbors who appeared at the first hearing about the conditions that they want, that what you've done, the modifications from the initial plans are satisfactory to them?
As far as I know, they are all changes that were requested pretty much
Mhm.
by the neighbors. I mean, in some cases, the neighbors would, we'd have an issue. For example, the proximity to one corner of the neighboring lot and this lot, as Ms. O'Donnell pointed out, looking at the initial plan, the question is, well, why was it laid out this way? Why wasn't it put back against the old parking lot? And that's really just because the engineers laid out the plan and they laid it out in what was the easiest way from an engineering standpoint. But these plans get changed once you talk to neighbors and find out what their concerns are. So principal concern of the neighbors was looking at this lot from their backyards, which are elevated up and back, and they're quieter than their front yards because they're on Randolph Ave. They didn't want to look right at the cars. And then looking at the parking lot from their bedroom windows, they were hoping to be shielded as well. So that's why these plans were changed to put in green giant arborvitaes. They grow well. They generally do well under a variety of conditions, including drought conditions, and they grow extremely large and extremely thick. So they are designed, they've been put in this plan so that that view will be obstructed and the neighbors won't be looking down at the cars. And of course, the reason for adding the other red maples was just to make it prettier and make it more of a mixture of vegetation. And that also seemed to be something that the neighbors liked. They also asked for the wooden fence. They asked for the residential style lighting. Those are all changes we made to satisfy concerns that the neighbors had. They asked about drainage, and our engineer was at the site walk and was able to explain how the new drainage would work, and also that there really wasn't any direction. The current stormwater drainage has no direction. It just comes straight down the hill. So it would be
Mhm.
improved by this plan. So those were all changes made in response to neighbors' concerns. And they were happier as a result of the changes. I think it's fair to say that any neighbor to a new proposal like this probably would prefer nothing happened. That's the way it always is. But
Right.
we did our best to address the specific concerns that this particular proposal raised.
Right, and they saw the site plans that were finally approved. And,
Yes.
okay. And I presume didn't raise any objections to the.
We haven't heard
to the
any.
thing. Yeah, okay, all right. And yeah, just a couple of quick things. I did try to follow the perimeter of the on the plan, which was difficult at some spots, but and I just did it because the number I had from the prior hearing was 4,900 square feet, which I assume was the parking lot itself. And
Yes.
the perimeter includes the trees and the fencing and everything around it, correct?
Not quite. The perimeter doesn't include all the new trees. Those are being planted on the remaining part of the lot to make it look nicer. What it
Okay.
does include, though, is an area set back from the fence. And the engineer said that we should, if we were going to do a marked perimeter, that we should do it that way because you have to be able to maintain the fence. There could be some activity outside the fence coming in,
Right.
and, replacing a piece
Yep.
of fence or replacing something to do with the way the fence or the lighting is installed. So that's why the perimeter shown on the plan is bigger than the square footage that I gave you at an earlier meeting, because that was just for the immediate parking area.
Okay. And just one other question. I don't, sorry if it sounds nitpicking, but I was corrected rightly so at the last hearing for using the term commercial use, which the plan uses. I mean, it's really the ultimate use is going to be mixed use.
It will be mixed use, and this is I mean, I haven't seen this exact way of approaching it, but I think it's a very good idea to do the marked perimeter, because the only area where the mixed use that's commercial will be allowed, and we had the site plan already, so that shows it, but that makes it very clear that it only applies to that area. There couldn't be any creep of commercial use to the front of the lot or to the house. You'd have to come back to the Board of Appeals if you ever anticipated trying to do something like that.
Right. But even the lot itself is mixed use because there are going to be residential tenants there. Yeah.
Yes, it will
Okay.
be mixed use. Yes.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ted. Julia, let me just ask generally whether there's anyone present at the hearing this evening who has any questions for Mrs. McKettrick regarding her presentation or the proposed relief that she's requesting. Julia, can you tell us, are there any hands up with members of the public or other people who want to ask questions regarding the application?
Yep, I don't have any hands up.
Okay. Let me ask whether there's anybody present this evening who wishes to be heard on this application, generally speaking, either for or against.
No hands up.
Okay. Then, Marion, do you have anything else you'd like to add in support of this application?
No, I think I've told you everything that I can. Thank you.
I think you have as well, but I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, okay, so if that's the case, then I think I should move to close the evidence portion of this particular hearing. Does anybody second that?
I'll second.
Okay, so Kathleen seconds that. So all in favor of closing the evidentiary hearing on this application? I think we should do this by roll call just to avoid any complications. So all those, and Miss O'Donnell, how do you vote on closing the evidence?
I think you have to vote it by roll call because we're on Zoom. So
I'm sorry. I
think
missed
you
what
have
you
to
said.
take a roll call vote
Roll call.
because we are on
I do
Zoom.
too. I do too. So
Because we're on Zoom.
okay, so we have a motion before us to close the evidence portion of this particular hearing. Julia, do you want to call the roll?
Sure. John, how do you vote?
Yes, on how they vote on the motion to close the evidence.
Oh, okay, so I just go one by one.
Mhm.
Yes, please.
Okay. Chairman Leonard, how do you vote?
I vote to close the evidence at this particular evidentiary hearing on this application.
Mr. Daber, how do you vote?
I vote to close the evidence at this point.
And Miss O'Donnell, how do you vote?
I'm voting in favor of closing the hearing. Yes.
Okay, so we have a vote of 3-0, a unanimous vote to close the evidence at the hearing. So the next issue before us is whether Mrs. McKettrick, do you want to be heard on any closing remarks or closing statement or argument in support of your application, or do you want to rest on your present present?
I'll rest on what I've said.
Okay. Thank you. So I suppose it's appropriate for us now to consider the application and the merits of the application in this open session. So, Ms. O'Donnell, do you want to be heard first on?
Well, I think we have sort of a smaller role in this approval than the planning board did. In that we're being asked is to address the variance for the mixed use. And so going back to what the hard work that the planning board did on putting in the conditions and all those sorts of things about how to address the mitigation of the parking spaces and parking lot. I think that I'm in favor of I think it's a huge safety improvement to provide these additional parking spaces in the location where they are. And I appreciate the work that has been done to, address the abutters' concerns and to, do the screening that's necessary and make sure that lighting isn't overspilling and all that sort of thing. So I thank the applicant for the work that they've done to mitigate the adverse impacts, but I do think it's a very much needed improvement to this property, and I would be voting in favor of it.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathleen. Mr. Daber, do you want to be heard on the merits of this application?
I agree with Ms. O'Donnell. A lot of work done on this, a lot of good work, and revisions to plans to modify them to satisfy the planning board and the abutters and their concerns, and also to mitigate the safety issue that the Milton Police requested. And and also, as Ms. McKettrick has pointed out, to try to do something with the property that will help, help the situation of parking, and particularly parking on the street, and use the back part of the property in the least obtrusive manner. So I am in favor of allowing the variance so that the parking portion of the property can be used for mixed uses as requested by the applicant.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Daber. I agree with both of my colleagues, and the first thing I'd like to do here is to thank Mrs. McKettrick for her thorough and very, very professional presentation of the evidence here before this Board of Appeals, and for her rather precise and exacting memorandum that made this understandable for me in a relatively short manner. I'd also like to congratulate the planning board. I thought their decision was a wise and well-written decision, and is a credit to the time and effort that they spent. I also think that this particular application has really substantial merit. I don't want to become overly emotional about historical buildings and the like, but this is a wonderful opportunity to reunite two beautiful historic properties in a very, very sensitive and tasteful manner. It provides a modest but meaningful improvement to a difficult parking situation that exists in this particular area. I remember the 2019 proceedings and the difficulty of parking on the street and traffic and the high-speed automobiles and all of that. And I think that this particular opportunity was one of great opportunity for Mr. Falcone and his company to reunite the properties and to provide 4 additional parking on a site that's a very, very delicate site. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of some rather difficult memories serving on the Board of Appeals where developers would purchase sites and tortuously take advantage of the site to try to grind out the last lot or the last square footage of development that really ended up not being approved and was really a disservice to the community. And I really think that this lot, when it's 672, is a lot that a commercial developer could develop under the existing zoning into 3 lots and could have built 3 rather nice houses on them and try to make a profit and a substantial profit that would have been a detriment to the neighborhood. And talk about privacy of a small parking lot. Putting 3 houses back in that area would have entailed blasting and noise and all kinds of difficulties. And while it may have produced a profit for the developer, it would have produced a disservice to the neighbors and to the community. And I think that the Falcone companies should be praised for their thoughtful way of purchasing 672 Pleasant Street and then converting it as part of the Bent's cookie factory. I can remember working on that application, and it was an amazing application. It was very interesting, the development of it into mixed-use development while maintaining the historic out and the outstanding exterior facade of the building is something that's really good for Milton and good for the town. And so I think this is a win-win situation for both the Falcone companies and really for the neighborhood and for the preservation of historic structures. While the cottage isn't technically designated as a historic structure, in point of fact, I think Mrs. McGettrick indicated it's 10 years older than the Bent's Cookie factory property. And I think in addition to that, the public safety is really enhanced here. And that's something that's really important because that's a blind intersection. And unless you're really familiar with traffic on Randolph Avenue, you have to be very, very careful. And I think that having parking to the rear, while it does have an impact on a couple of the neighbors, I think Mrs. McGettrick and the applicant are really to be praised and congratulated on working with the neighbors to ameliorate to the extent that you can the imposition on the rear neighborhood in those 2 houses. And I think I'm not good at reading engineering plans, but reading the plans, the plantings, and how the new parking has been restructured, I think it's really a credit to the neighbors being flexible, and to Mr. Falcone and his company in making some very expensive improvements to this site. Big trees, such as the ones that are being discussed here, are very, very expensive. But I think they'll enhance the properties to the rear. They'll provide a nice environment, and while providing a benefit to the town as well. So I'm of the view that that this application has substantial merit. It's probably best from the neighbors, so you don't have development back there of additional housing. It's best for the town. It's best for historical structures, and I think that's always our guiding light here. What's in the best interests of the the town, and certainly allowing this application is solves and it meets that test. So I intend to vote in favor of this application, and I'm going to suggest to my colleagues that we enter into a series of conditions on the variance and the modification of the 2019 special permit. They're kind of outlined very well in Ms. McKittrick's February 22nd, 24 memorandum to the board, which we can include as part of our decision, and that we adopt as a condition of the variance and the modification application, the compliance with the site plan modification decision of the planning board. Does anyone want to be further heard on issues of conditions? Did you want to
So-
be heard on that?
We just wanted a question. So you think that, so the conditions would be what? On page 4 of I guess Mary McKittrick's memo, those, the provisions that are in that modification section 2 section of page 4?
I think more. I think
I mean, I
those
would
do
have just
more.
said that I would just condition my variance on compliance with this site plan decision by the planning board and leave it at that, but were
Well,
you thinking of more?
Well, I just I don't know that the all of the provisions of the the planning board had nothing to do with variances.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
yeah, right, okay.
We're granting a variance, so
Yeah.
we're gonna deal with the standards for a variance in the decision, and then what I didn't do, but I'd like to certainly hear from Mrs. McGettrick. I just wanted to be sure that any issues that may be special issues for the planning board that were not dealt with by the site plan decision of the planning board are dealt with by us. And then maybe that's just incorporating the plans and some of the references as to the more recent updates. Marion, do you want to be briefly heard on the
I
the
do
issue
think
of-
that, it's an interesting question. The site plan incorporates all of the changes described in my memo, including the ones under modification of section 2 of the Board of Appeals decision. I listed 5 changes. Those are changes from the approved parking from the parking that the Board of Appeals approved as
Mhm.
sufficient. The Board
Yeah.
of, it's an odd, because this is a pre-existing non-conforming use and it's
Right.
not a business district, it's up to the Board of Appeals to decide a number of different things. And one of them in 2019 was the parking plan sufficient for the use proposed?
Mhm.
And the Board of Appeals determined that it was, and that was tied to a site plan that was about to be approved by the planning board, showing certain parking spaces off-site. And we can't condition these decisions on certain parking spaces on the street because that's up to the town. Those were
Right.
discussed. It's the on-site or off the road parking spaces and their configuration and design that had to be approved by you as part of your decision. And so when we came forward with this application, the applicant proposed a number of changes to that parking plan. So I think those changes should be conditions. I know they're shown in the site plan, but I think they should be listed as conditions in your decision because they're amendments to your 2019 decision.
So we would
on
just
page
have to
4.
go back. I'm trying to see, I don't think I have a copy of the 2019 decision in front of me, but so what we need to do then when we're drafting this decision is to sort of reference those specific provisions in the old one in the 2019 that are being modified, right?
Yeah, I did review, I do have it, but And I did review it in order to
Yeah.
come to the conclusion that these were the changes that we were asking for.
Okay.
And it's true that the actual reference in the 2019 decision is going to be to the 2019 site plan, showing the off-road or on-site parking spaces and how they were designed. And including, for example, tandem parking. Tandem parking was, the Board of Appeals agreed to that proposal for 4 parking spaces, 2 in the rear and then 2 in front, just for employees. That was a specific a condition that you agreed to. Well, they're not there anymore, so that's no longer a requirement or a part of the plan, nor are and we, you've added short-term parking spaces, you've added additional parking spaces, you've added a driveway. None of these things were shown. So I think those should be listed. But in general, all the details of this decision in terms of the layout and configuration are in the site plan. The one thing that you are doing, though, as a Board of Appeals, is deciding how to describe the mixed use, the approval of mixed use for this site. And that has to refer back to the perimeter of the parking area that's allowed for commercial use. As Mr. Daver requested, that parking area now is shown on the plan, and that should be specifically referenced as a condition that this mixed use can be implemented in this area, in this part of the lot, and as a parking area. I just haven't seen a decision exactly like this. Usually when you do mixed use, you just say the whole lot's mixed use, and the bottom is commercial, the top of the building is residential or something like that.
Yeah.
This is a little different. So I just ask the board members to give some thought to that, to make sure that however it's described in the decision is appropriate in terms of what you want.
I guess I'm
Well,
not,
since-
I'm not finding at the Registry of Deeds, the decision in 2019 mustn't have been issued to Falcone Properties LLC. It was issued to somebody else.
Yeah, I've got it. Hold on. I'll give you I think I've got the book and page.
Yeah, if you just give me the book and page, I can get it.
I think I gave it to you in the application.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was in the original package that we received.
It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll find it then. Thank you.
So can so I don't forget it. So as we were talking, I was looking at this page 4. So part of that condition, I guess, that you just referred to, Ms. McKettrick, it says in your memo, the proposed on-site parking areas, which are only for the use of the approved businesses and residents in the Bent's building.
Yes.
And I guess that's one of the conditions as well. They're only to be used by tenants and occupants of the Bent's building.
Right.
Marion, can I ask you a question here? Because you've dealt with these issues extensively, and particularly before the planning board, and there is a little bit of similarity between our positions here. But since it's so important, having got the planning board site plan approval, that you tie in changes to the 2019 decision. Do you, and I don't want to put a burden on you, but do you intend to file a draft decision or a memorandum that specifically deals with these issues? Or do you prefer
well,
that? What I'm afraid of is the board comes up with a special permit and a variance that doesn't cover the issues that you expect to be covered, and it gets filed and it's not adequate for your intended purposes. And I would hate to see that happen.
Well, if you would like me to try to write a draft decision, that would ensure that at least what I put in the draft is what I think should be in the decision. Then you three, the members of the Board of Appeals, though, then have to decide whether that's adequate, whether they want more. You'll still be able to rewrite
absolutely right. What I just don't want to do is have one of us write a decision which you and your clients think are deficient or is deficient because it doesn't cover certain matters, and then we have to come in back again and amend the decision. We can certainly read the conditions that you are suggesting and decide whether to adopt them or not. But at least we'll know what you are looking for here with some degree of precision. And I say that because I would expect that the investment that your client has made in the 672 parcel is substantial. And this is a more a project of his heart, or of the Falcones company's heart, as it is to making money. And it would be tragic if we entered a decision that needed to be amended and have to come back here and re-advertise and go through it. I think we'd rather know what you find appropriate, and if we find it inappropriate, we won't do it. But on the other hand, I don't want to put
I'm happy to try
an
to do that
unnecessary
draft.
burden on.
I can just read to you a little bit from the previous decision regarding parking. That the variant that you granted some variances for parking. They were specifically to allow less than the usual parking setbacks. This is in the existing lot in back of Bent's. And then they were to allow stacked parking, which normally we don't allow. And so there was a rear setback of 0 feet, and none of that has changed. So none of those variances will still be in effect. We're not asking for any change to those variances, except that we're eliminating the stacked parking, so we no longer need a variance for stacked parking. So that could be referenced in the decision. It's elimination of a required variance. But there were design standards relating to setbacks that you provided relief for in that decision. And in other respects, I'm looking for this is a long decision. It was a section of the decision when I just referred to when you referred to determining adequacy of parking, and you determined what was there was adequate, and now you're allowing it to be better, basically. So I don't know exactly. It's not really a change to the original decision. It's just this just improves on the condition. But in any case, first of all, I will send Julia the book and page reference because
I've got it. We've got it.
Oh, did you
I've
find
got
it? Okay. And the copy of the decision was provided as part of the application.
I've got that too. Thank you.
I can do a draft. You just have to think about, I'm going to be looking carefully back again at the original decision. I want to make sure that anything that you are changing is referenced properly. But I think that condition that the parking area can only be occupied by tenants, visitors, and so forth of the Bent's building is a very important condition and should be a condition in your decision. I think the decision should refer to the marked area that can be used for this commercial parking lot, and that doesn't extend beyond that the mixed use only refers to that commercial use of the back of the lot.
Yeah, what my concern is the board, because of a lack of familiarity of everything that went on before the planning board, will either write a variance or amendment to the special permit that's longer than a 10-page letter or whatever, and that causes unnecessary confusion, or we'll do something that's so simple as adopting a couple of plans and leave out issues that you think should be dealt with in that decision. And I think that if my memory is correct, if we're going to vote on this application, we haven't done that yet, but we will. And if we vote on it and close the hearing tonight, we have 14 days to file a written decision with the town clerk's office. And some of us may find that closing in very, very fast. I'd prefer that at least if we write a decision that you and your client agree with and that we think is the right decision, that can be filed in short order. Whereas if we go back and forth with a series of meetings discussing various parts of the decision, we're liable to find ourselves with 2 days to go and end up filing something which, while well intended, may not touch all of the bases that you're looking for. That's my concern here.
So sometimes in the past, you've assigned one member of the board to be sort of the front key person on and then if the attorney, if I say, well, I'll try to draft something, I would create a draft, send it to that person who would then do a preliminary review, and there might be some back and forth. And then that would go to the whole board and you'd review it and you might make changes. That's one way to do it. The other way, if you write the decision, I don't believe the applicant, has the right to ask for revisions. I could point out inaccuracies, but normally when it's done that way, that's the end of it, that's fine too, if that's the way you want to do it. I'm not sure what your preference is from what you're saying.
Well, I think, to be frank about it, is if you send us a draft decision, then that makes life not only easier for us, it may be an insurance policy for Mr. Falcone, who's been very collegial and professional and here, and not have a decision that he is thinks doesn't encompass what you proved at this hearing or what you have suggested, because of our unfamiliarity with some of these things. It's entirely up to you. I would recommend that you're doing a draft decision, send it to all three of us, and we'll put our heads together and crank out a decision. Kathleen, do you want to be heard on this issue?
Well, I mean, I just think I'm looking at the old permit, and so on page 7, there's the language about the variances that we allowed for the parking. And that's clearly what needs to be revised, because it's, allowing 4 tandem employee spaces. I don't think the rest of the decision we're touching at all. Pretty much, we're just dealing with the parking one. So this seems to me there's 2 things that we're doing. One, we're allowing the commercial use on the residential parcel, and described in that on page 5 of the 8 of the plans. It shows that commercial area. So that's the first part. And then the second part is revising the variance that we gave in 2019 for what the existing parking is. I mean, the new changes on the new plan that has just been approved. So so looks to me that that's the 2 things, is that we're allowing the commercial use on the residential lot, and 2, revising the variances we gave in 2019 to reflect the new conditions.
So that would be a 1-page decision or a 2-page decision.
It's not very long.
It'd be a summary type of decision.
Yeah, and then the condition of conditioned upon continued compliance with the site plan approval issued by the planning board. So 3 components.
Right. And those are the conditions. I mean, the decision isn't going to be 1 page, because there's more to a decision that any Board of Appeals decision has certain technical.
Oh yeah, style things. Yeah.
Oh sure, you want to cite
it's
the
gonna be more than
variance
1 page.
provision and all of that.
But you're right. I mean, it's certainly much less complicated than the original 2019 decision as far as the parking modifications go.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is the way the board, I can draft a decision. I can try to provide the justification that you've talked about for the variance, and then you'll be reviewing it and editing it. I can do that. I'll try to do that quickly.
Preferable to me.
Okay.
Ted, do you want to be heard on all of this?
All this. No, I think it's a fine idea if Ms. McKettrick wants to or is willing to do a draft decision. I agree. There may be I don't know that we've received the same detail that the planning board has received, and I wouldn't want to miss any items that should be included in a decision either. I do want to make sure we get conditions that should be in there, but I also want to make sure that we don't miss any variances that would be required technically for this altered use of the property. So.
Yeah,
I will say,
I agree. And
yeah.
I think initially my thought was this decision would be multiple pages. But I hear what Marion is saying, and
I don't think so.
No, I know. I hear what you're saying. It's
There is a difference in
you may be right, but
parking.
if there's going to be a decision here that's going to be 1.5 pages, let's assume, and the applicant and Mrs. McKettrick, with all of her experience and appearances before the planning board, is content with that, then I say hallelujah. I'm not interested in seeing a 10 or 20-page decision being written. If simplicity will prevail, but every time I've tried to rely on simplicity, it tended to be oversimplified, and I just don't want to. I want to be sure that from the applicant's perspective, all of the bases have been touched, and if they have, that's wonderful. If they haven't, then we did our best, so I tend to think what Kathleen O'Donnell suggests. I have immense confidence in her analytical abilities and mental decisions and all of that. I say the simpler the better if that's the way it is. And if that's the way it is, I don't think it's a major league imposition if Marion takes a quick shot at it and sends us what she thinks, and we'll put our heads together and come to a prompt decision. That makes sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think what we should do here, before we go too far ahead of ourselves, is vote in favor of this application. I think that I'm not sure. Do we officially vote with Julia? I don't have a clear recollection of whether we actually voted to allow the amendment and allow the special permit.
Yep.
Ted, what's your recollection? Kathleen, can you help us?
What we should
What's
be.
the question?
The application is for, a variance, to, allow
amendment to the special permit.
well, yeah, actually, yes. It wasn't a special permit, wasn't it a variance?
It was a use variance.
Yeah,
It was a use
It's
variance.
an application for a use variance.
yeah.
It's also an application for modification of a
Special
prior.
of a special
Modification of a prior.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was it's not, we didn't have a special permit, we had a variance that we issued. Right?
Right.
What are we modifying?
So we're
If we grant the
modifying,
use variance.
we're modifying the use variance that we allowed in our 2019 decision.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I see the special permit, and modifying the special permit to address the changes in the parking.
Okay, that's what we're doing here. And I
Yeah.
guess my question is, have we formally voted
No, we
on-
haven't
on
voted
those
yet. We
issues.
voted only to close the hearing. We didn't vote.
That's
to
right. That's what I
issue a grant.
thought. So isn't it appropriate for us to vote?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And so and then await Mrs. McKettrick's
And
work
then
of
with
art
the
for
decision to be
architecture.
issued with the, yeah, right. So I would make a motion to approve a variance for the mixed use on the residential lot at 672 Randolph Avenue, and to amend the special permit to conform to the new parking approved by the planning board.
I'll second those motions. Julia, do you want to call the roll? Ted, do you have anything to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we do have to have to be a little more specific that the variance would be approved as to the specific area that's shown
right. Mhm.
on the plan, and not the whole
Yeah,
property.
right. Good call.
And subject to the conditions that we've talked about, including that it be subject to the conditions, same conditions imposed by in the planning board decision, and that it only be used by tenants, occupants, and visitors of
Mhm.
the Bent's building. And I don't know whether there were other ones.
I got it. Yeah, it was that the driveway would be constructed from the existing parking area to the new parking area. The tandem parking spaces would be eliminated. 5 parking spaces for apartment tenants are relocated to the new. So we just would say that if we just said that the new spaces would be used for employees, tenants, customers, and visitors of the Bent's building. And that, that would allow the modifications to the parking area behind 7 and 9 Pleasant Street.
Do you want me to do the roll now?
No, hold on one second. I have a question, and that is, I understand from either Marion's letter or something in the planning board decision that we're essentially using I'll call it the excess property at 672, but that the cottage itself was somehow going to be used by employees or
Oh, no.
No, the
So that's
cottage will
not part of
continue to be a residential use. And that could be part of the condition. I mean, not only.
Well,
you
I
could-
think if we say that we're only allowing the variance for the mixed use for the commercial area shown on the plan,
Yeah.
then that's the limitation of that commercial use.
and
That's why I
don't
asked-
have to we don't have to deal with the occupancy of the cottage.
No,
No,
in any
because
way.
it could be any kind of tenant or,
Yeah.
there's,
Right.
we don't have restrictions as to who can occupy a residential space as long as it's
Right.
being used residentially.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that cottage is not necessarily part of the
no, it's not part of the
Ben's
application.
operation.
It's
Okay.
not part of the application.
Okay. I think I
And that's
agree with
why,
that.
that's why I asked for this, the sketch that would show the commercial area. Because I think that was something that I raised at a prior hearing, is that if we wanted to say some part of that lot is mixed use, commercial, we wanted to know what it actually was, how much of it. And so that's why that line is in there.
Okay, I'm content with that. Are you content, Ted?
Yes, yeah, and can as to what? We were talking about a lot of things.
I mean, this is a case where you almost have to see something in writing to know that
Right.
you want something added, which will be entirely, of
Yeah,
course, up to the members
there
of the
may
board.
there may be things that we haven't thought of. There may be, minor conditions or something that we haven't thought of, and that may have to be added, as there always are in the Board of Appeals decisions on variances that are ones that are put in routinely in decisions. So I'm not sure how we should phrase the motion.
Well,
Well,
I think-
what if we said that we would move to approve a variance to permit the commercial use on 672 Randolph Ave, as shown on the site plan approved by the planning board. I think it's sheet 5 of 8.
Mhm.
That's one.
Yep.
And then 2, that we would amend the special permit to provide for, to amend the special permit to comply with the site plan approval issued by the planning board. Subject to the conditions that it's used, the new parking is used for tenants, occupants, employees, customers, and visitors of the Bent Building, and such other conditions as may be required to provide the relief requested by the applicant. That gives us fudge room
And comply with the
and the site plan.
conditions of
decision.
the planning board
Planning
decision
board.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. How's that?
I think that's good. I think that covers a lot of sins. I'll second that motion. So all those in favor, Julia, would you call the roll on those two matters?
Chairman Leonard, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of both.
All right, Mr. Daber, how do you vote?
I vote in favor as well.
And Ms. O'Donnell, how do you vote?
I vote in favor.
Great. I guess the issues have been resolved. Are there any other outstanding matters that you want to address or cover at this particular hearing? Because
No.
I think we're ready to adjourn.
Okay, and there's going to be a draft decision
Yes.
From
prepared.
Mrs. McKenzie.
Okay.
And you've asked me to prepare a draft, which I will do.
Yes,
if I can.
Yeah.
And send it to Julia, and she will send it to
and she'll
all.
distribute it to us, and we'll do our very best to turn that around with an executed decision as soon as we're able to do.
And thank you very much, Marion, for,
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. And thank you.
I really appreciate that.
So, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
I think we can do this. Can we do this by a voice vote, Kathleen? I don't think we need a. Do we?
I don't think you
Roll
need a
call
roll call
vote.
for that.
So all in favor, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, so we're adjourned, and thank Marion. Thank you very, very much. I think
Thank you.
my concern is either that we were going to go over the cliff with 10 or 12 page decision and mortify you, or would do a decision that would be a half a page, and
That would be
the
me.
Falcone just would be trying to run us out of town because we didn't address the meaningful issues before us. So at least I think we're going to land in a safe place.
Yeah, I never filled a blue book in my life, so yeah, I'm
Okay,
So,
good.
thanks
Thank
to Kathleen and to Ted
Okay.
for your hard work. And And thank you, Marion. We appreciate your kind offer, and we look forward to your decision being draft decision being rendered.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you,
Right.
Okay.
Good night.
Thanks, Julia.
everybody.
We appreciate. Have a
Have
good
a
night,
good night.
everybody.
Okay,
Good night.
you too. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.